we had exactly the same experience. We would fake being in, for example, Italy and would get Italian prices. So you were far better off pretending to be elsewhere.
Okay, this is Dan of Vagabond Awake. Today we have Richard. Richard, welcome to the channel.
Thanks, Dan.
I would shake Richard's hand, but I'm getting over a cold and Richard travels tomorrow, so we don't want to get him sick. So Richard, where in the world are we sitting right now?
Well, we're in Luang, Prabang in Laos, of all places. Somewhere north of Vientiane, the capital.
Right. And how in the world did you end up here?
Well, my wife got a one-year placement volunteering at a local educational institution, so I'm tagging along, and I've been here for a month now. I'm returning to Australia tomorrow, and I'll be coming back in about 6 weeks.
Okay. And this isn't the beginning of your recent travels, is it?
No, I took most of 2023 traveling through Southeast Asia, Southern Europe, the Balkans, and Austria and a few other places. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were 9 months on the road, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Wow. Was that the first time you had done that sort of excursion in your life?
Way back in 1984.
Okay.
It was my first extended travel trip. I spent over a year traveling through Europe, Scandinavia, Middle East, Russia, China. Yeah, so quite an extended, it's a bit of a rite of passage for young Australians.
Right.
To head off, and it's expensive to get from one place to the other. It's a long way, so we tend to go for a while. And in the meantime, I've probably spent a total of 2 months off and on in Southeast Asia, so Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, those sorts of places.
Right. When you live in Australia, it takes forever to get anywhere. And that's why I always recommend that people, even Americans or Europeans, when they fly somewhere, Southeast Asia, South America, wherever, they spend some time there and they slow travel around regions, because it's cheaper to move around inland, often, not always, than it is to fly. And you get to see the ground around you and stuff. So in this most recent 9 months, were you a ground traveler mostly, or were you flying more? How would you say that happened?
It was a combination.
Right.
Particularly in the Balkans, you tend to travel by bus.
Right.
So a lot of that was overland.
Right.
On some excursions, we flew, for example, from Italy to Portugal, or from London to 𝗙𝗏𝗀, which is the capital of Montenegro. But when you're in Europe, air travel is cheap.
Extremely.
It depends on when and how you book it. If you're Australian and you book it from Australia, you get charged eye-wateringly high prices, but if you end up in Europe, everything's very, very cheap. There are discount airlines everywhere.
So if you're in Australia and you book, say, one flight to England,
yes,
and then from England you book flights around Europe, because you're sitting in Australia at the time of booking, it costs more to do those little jumps.
Yeah.
I've found that to be true from the United States. Not only that, but like if I'll use my VPN to say I'm in somewhere else in the world, and say I want to fly from US to Europe or to South America or Southeast Asia, I'll get a better rate.
Yes.
Because I don't think I have as much money. I'm not some idiot who, fell off a turnip truck a few minutes. So
we had exactly the same experience. We would fake being in, for example, Italy, and would get Italian prices. You can get good conversion with your Wise card, so you were far better off pretending to be elsewhere.
Yeah.
And they price gouge these things. If to get back to Laos, I'll probably buy a ticket, the ticket that just takes me to Bali or to Bangkok,
right,
and then buy my AirAsia ticket in Asia,
right,
for exactly that reason.
Yeah. There's a set amount of time. I think if you book it in that period, you get lower rates. Not always, but you can often still get a pretty good rate.
There was a sweet spot around 6 weeks out.
Right.
The prices were optimal.
Right.
Getting closer to the date, you pay through the nose. Booking further out, you pay a lot. So you really have to get your timing right as well.
So your timing, you found around how many weeks?
6.
6 weeks, okay. Yeah. The point is, find your sweet spots when you're booking. Yeah. But what you said earlier is true, and you're flying from London to Montenegro.
Yeah.
That's what, you're not going to take buses and trains, right?
No.
The flight's so cheap, why would you? So you always have to compare what is a bus, what is a minivan, how long does it take, and then what is an air flight, and often you'll find that you can have a much more comfortable travels when you're going distances by flying, especially in places like Europe where the rates are low for short flights.
And it seems like a bizarre thing to do when you're in London. I mean, we're just right next to France and we could have gone overland.
Yeah.
But of course, we were caught up with the Schengen visa problem, where we'd spent our 90 days in the Schengen area.
Yeah.
We had to escape to Britain, where my wife's from Britain originally. An Australian can stay there for 6 months, visa on arrival, like it's very easy.
Right, right.
So we were able to stay there for, I think, about 2 months, and then we still couldn't go back to France because we still hadn't spent 90 days outside.
Yeah, once you're in 90, you got to spend 90 out before you come back.
Montenegro's not in the Schengen, so
right.
neither is Albania, so that's why we had to skip over so much of Europe, and we're glad we did. I mean, it's a fantastic part of the world and very different and very interesting history, but you wouldn't want to, I mean, it would have been much more convenient to just pop across to France. It's a difficult rule. When I first travelled back in '84, Europe was pretty much, it wasn't borderless in the sense that you would still have to show your passport going from place to place, but there wasn't much border control. They didn't bother stamping you or all this sort of thing. So I spent most of that year anywhere in Europe and without any restriction.
What do they call that? Your free year in Australia? They have a name for it. Like
yeah, I mean, it's variously called a gap year.
Gap year, there it is.
Yeah.
So where in Australia are you from?
Tasmania.
Tasmania?
Yeah, originally from the northwest of the state, but now I live in the south.
So as a couple now, moving forward, you see yourselves like this, continuing to kind of slow travel around the world, or do you think you'll pick a place, or what are your thoughts about the future?
Our original intention was to start to slow travel from about next year onward. It was just by chance that this position came up to work in Laos for her, so that's kind of brought it forward a bit.
Right.
It meant that I could kind of pull the pin and leave work. Because I've got the opportunity to casually work with my boss, or with my employer, I can kind of intersperse that with travel and living here. I've got my feet in 3 camps, one in Laos, one in traveling. Like when I come back, I'll probably go via somewhere. I'm really keen on going to 𝗵𝗏𝗄𝐿𝐴 in the Philippines.
Yeah,
I saw your video on that. I thought, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
So I want to sort of do that, and then when she finishes up her year, we'll see what happens then. She has her job to go back to. She's younger. She still has some working life.
Okay, okay. What's your feeling now or about the 9 months you did? What did it feel like?
This ebook shares the 3 big mistakes that expats make when they retire overseas. To get a free copy, either scan this QR code with your smartphone or click the second link in the notes below this YouTube video.
The 9 months you did, what did it feel like?
Oh, it was just such a great adventure in seeing so many different places. Some places I'd been to before, had been to Austria, for example, Hungary, but that was 1984. This is 40 years ago. So Hungary was staggeringly different.
Oh,
and so vibrant compared to when I was there. When I was there, it was under communist rule.
Right.
So a lot had politically changed. Other places I really didn't understand, or the history of places like Albania.
Right.
And so that was a real eye-opener. Montenegro is so sublimely beautiful. The old town there is just stunning. It was just a terrific way to do it. And I travelled by myself before, so it was nice to have someone with me to enjoy it with.
And how did you decide? Did you just plan in advance, or did you kind of decide as you went how long you would stay in each place?
Pretty much made it up as we went along. If somewhere was working out well, we'd stay longer. The only time we really hammered it and went 2 and 3 night stays was in Italy.
Right.
Mainly because of the expense.
Sure.
So Italy's not cheap if you've ever been there. So places like Verona, Rome, Florence, which is mind-blowingly beautiful.
Right.
You can't afford to stay there for as long as you'd like to. I'd stay there for a month or a year.
Yeah, sure.
You kind of have to keep moving. Whereas Portugal was much more inexpensive. We'd book a week in one of the coastal towns like Nazaré. It was just so relaxing to settle into the whole way of life they had there.
During your working years, did you have that kind of freedom to stay as long as you wanted in a place, or?
The trip through Malaysia and Thailand, I think that was a 6-week trip.
Right.
And we probably spent a week at a time in each place.
The difference here is that you didn't have like a month or two that you had to plan for. You were like, we're leaving for, we don't know how long, maybe 9 months, a year. Just go as we please.
Yeah. I mean, particularly this year for me, there's not much structure to it. I have 2 children, both of whom are graduating this year, so I'll be, like April, I'm going to be back home for one graduation, and then I think perhaps October for another one.
Okay,
so
okay.
In between that, I'll travel, come back here, do the house husband thing for my long-suffering wife who's
still working, yeah.
and then skive off to have some fun, because, like I said, airfares are so cheap. I can pop down to. I haven't been to Cambodia. I'd love to go to 𝐂𝐴𝐒 𝐿.
𝐂𝐴𝐒 𝐿, yeah.
And see that. My wife will get some leave at times, so we'll be able to travel together for things like that.
Right.
But she's more locked into a normal, what we would call a normal Australian annual leave amount, which is 4 weeks annual leave.
Yeah.
As teachers, of course, we have more like 12 weeks annual leave,
right.
which is a bit of a bonus of the job. I will say in Australia the pay isn't too bad.
Oh.
I don't know what it pays in the United States.
I just know that the teacher friends of mine struggle more than people in the private sector. I don't really know the pay.
It's around US dollars, probably 80,000 a year.
In the US?
No, sorry, in Australia.
Oh, Australia. I really don't know what America would be. Yeah, and so for people that value travel, it's a great job in my opinion. For that reason, I really value travel. So during your 9-month stint when you didn't know how long you'd be where, what did you do about, did you buy health insurance?
We did buy health insurance. We had, I think between us it cost a little over $1,000 US. That was medical only. So we didn't have any elaborate bookings or air flights paid in advance. It really didn't matter much. If our plans were disrupted, we had a fairly low cost. Like we only would pay for the next hotel in advance. So we'd probably miss $200 we might blow if we couldn't get to that hotel and there was no refund, for example. So we didn't take out insurance for any of that. For theft, we didn't take out insurance because we don't have valuables that are that valuable. So it was all purely medical. I've really enjoyed watching your channel and soaking up, harvesting all of your what things cost in various places and how much you can rent for apartments for a month and then for nightly stays and stuff. I've absolutely loved that. And my wife and I will often have a conversation as we're having a walk, and I'll say, well, according to Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for Vagabond.good, I'll preface it like that because we know a few people called Dan, right? So I have to sort of, and then I'll say, if we just go to the Philippines, we could probably rent somewhere for XYZ and let the house out for a year, and we'd pretty much cover ourselves, She's like, yeah, but what about visas? You can't stay in a place for a year. I said, well, according to Dan, you can, So we'll, it's always been, a great way to kind of expand our horizons because the Philippines has always been a little bit off track for Australians because everything's in a direct line going up through Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand. That's all in a very neat bundle. Vietnam, Cambodia, but you kind of have to do an extra hike out to there. So you've given me reason to go.
Yeah, you do have to catch a flight out there.
It changes all the time in Australia because if you flew Qantas, like the national carrier, you would pay through the nose. I think Cebu Air or one of those, they've just started up a direct flight from either Sydney or Melbourne to Manila.
Okay.
And it's like half the cost of traveling. Because they're a budget carrier. Yeah, I was pleased when I came here to find that you could stay for a month, visa on arrival or e-visa to come in, and then another month you can just go to immigration and pay a little extra to extend that for a month. So, kind of keeps it flexible.
So you'll need to do that, but not your wife because she's on a work visa, is that it?
Yeah, she'll have a 1-year multiple entry deal.
So if you can do 1 month and then extend a month, do you know how long you have to come out before you can come back in? Or
I haven't figured it out in the sense that I've tried it, but from my understanding, if I pop down to Thailand for a couple of days or whatever, then they're quite amenable to you coming back over the border.
Okay.
I think they've seen that tourism is quite a good source of foreign exchange, and tourism, particularly in the Luang Prabang, has boomed. Friends I've had who lived in Laos have said that it was a very sleepy village only like 8 years ago or something. But now it's really humming with tourists. Ironically meant that we had quite a lot of difficulty finding somewhere to live permanently, or rather my wife finding somewhere to live permanently, because all of the accommodation is soaked up by tourists.
Yeah.
Pesky buggers. Like,
I know, they have a lot of nerve.
Yeah. So even with the real estate agent, they had like a handful, like 3 choices of where we could actually stay, and even one of those disappeared within a day of seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you go back up north and south through Laos, are you riding that cool fast train you've got going now?
Yeah, when I went to Vientiane last week and took the high-speed train down and back, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't done the bus ride, but from all accounts, it's bumpy to treacherous, depending on your appetite. I mean, I've taken buses in Albania and Montenegro, so I've experienced driving within half a metre of a precipice that takes you several hundred metres to a certain depth. So your appetite for that increases over time.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, apparently it's pretty hard going. But the train is very comfortable. There's a few restrictions getting on, but they're not onerous things. You just can't carry a whole bunch of things that you wouldn't carry on an aircraft.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's pretty fast.
160 kilometers an hour, so.
And it's also priced right.
830,000 kip down and back, which I guess is
45 bucks.
Yeah, 45 US.
Round trip.
That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think that'd be 22 bucks each, 22.50 each way. And I think the bus is 10 or 12.
Yeah. So, and you're spending hours uncomfortably, whereas it's an air-conditioned train.
Air-conditioned,
smooth,
fast, and you see scenery. It's beautiful windows. You see the whole thing. It's just, it's a 1 or 2 hour trip instead of 10 or 12 hours or whatever it is.
And bonus for me is I really want to go to China. I went there last in '85,
right?
So 40 years ago. And apparently things have changed. So it was everyone wore just green and blue Mao suits back then. There were only 2 colours of clothing that everybody wore, except one child I saw wore a pink outfit they must have gotten in Hong Kong or something. I can't imagine what it's like, other than from the footage I've seen for things like the Beijing Olympics and so on. So I'm really keen to go back. And the train that goes to Vientiane also goes to Kunming.
Well, Richard, it's been a blast chatting with you. You'll have to let us know how things go, what the two of you end up doing going forward after this 1 year is over with her work, her volunteer work here. But thanks so much for coming on the channel.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Dan.
You have a great day.
Thanks for having us.